The suitcase hit the porch steps with a heavy sound that didn't belong to fabric or leather. It sounded like something ending. Rain had just begun to fall, thin and steady, the kind that soaks everything quietly. My suitcase bounced once, then landed near the flower pot I planted last spring. The soil had gone dry weeks ago. She stopped watering it long before she stopped speaking kindly. Clara stood in the doorway. The porch light behind her threw a glow around her hair, turning her silhouette sharp and bright. "You have 3 days," she said. "I already called the locksmith." Her arms were crossed, her nails painted a color that didn't suit her but probably suited the people she wanted to impress. I noticed how calm she looked, calm like someone reading a line they'd practiced 100 times. I bent down slowly. The suitcase was half open. A corner of my sweater hung out, drinking the rain. I pushed it back in and zipped it. One of the zippers was broken, so it caught halfway, but I didn't force it. Some things don't close properly anymore. "I'll be gone," I said quietly. "Good," she replied, but her voice cracked on that single word. I stood up, holding the handle that still had a tag from years ago. The paper had faded, but my handwriting remained. Myra Ball, 1346 Weller Street. A place I once thought would be the last address I'd ever need. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her jaw tight, her shoulders straight, her eyes avoiding mine. For a second, I saw the little girl who used to tug my sleeve when she was scared of thunder. But that child was gone, buried under layers of self-help slogans and curated calm. "You've made this house your prison," she said, "and I'm tired of living like your cellmate." Her tone was clean. No guilt, no hesitation. I almost admired it. I nodded once and walked down the steps. The sound of my shoes on the wet concrete echoed in the space between us. She didn't follow. She just watched, and I think she was waiting for me to beg. I didn't. At the car, I opened the trunk and placed the suitcase inside. When I looked up, the porch light flickered, then died completely. She turned away. The door closed. The lock clicked. That was the last sound she gave me. For a moment, I just stood there, hands still on the trunk, rain sliding down my wrist like veins finding a new direction. My body felt lighter than it should have. Maybe freedom and exile weigh the same when you're old enough to stop telling the difference. I got into the car and turned the key. The wipers groaned to life, scraping across the glass. Through the window, the house looked smaller than I remembered, almost embarrassed to stand in front of me. I reached for my phone and dialed the one number that still had a place in my heart. "Alvin," I said when he answered. My voice came out calm, like I was asking about the weather. "Myra, are you all right? I need to remove my name from the mortgage." There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear him thinking. Alvin had been my friend before he became my lawyer, and that made everything harder. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked softly. "She asked me to leave," I said. "I'm only following her request." "Myra, if you withdraw, she'll have 30 days to refinance. If she can't, the bank—" "I know," I said, cutting him off. "Start the paperwork today." He hesitated again. "She'll lose the house." "She wanted freedom," I said, watching rain spill down the windshield. "I'm giving her a taste of it," he sighed. "I'll begin the process. You'll have documents to sign by morning." "Thank you, Alvin." When the call ended, I sat in silence. The rain was heavier now, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. I thought of Eli, my grandson, asleep upstairs, the way he used to whisper, "Grandma, don't go," whenever I left for the night shift. I wondered if she would tell him I left by choice, or if she would just erase me entirely, the way people delete photos that no longer match their new story. The drive to the motel took 15 minutes. The neon sign out front blinked in red and white, vacancy, a word that had never felt more fitting. Inside, the hallway smelled of bleach and wet carpet. The woman at the desk didn't ask questions. She handed me a key with a small wooden tag that said 12. I thanked her, though I couldn't remember the last time I said that word and meant it. The room was small. One window, one bed, one light that flickered like it was nervous to stay on. The wallpaper peeled near the corner, showing the faded outline of a different pattern beneath. Layers on layers. People leave pieces of themselves everywhere. I set my suitcase on the bed. It left a dark mark where the water dripped from its sides. I opened it. Clothes crumpled, half-folded, smelling faintly of her detergent and resentment. My notebook was bent at the spine. I placed it gently on the table, beside the kettle she never wanted me to bring. I filled it with tap water and turned it on. The hum was sharp, familiar. When it clicked off, I poured the boiling water over the tea leaves I kept in a paper bag. The smell filled the room, earthy, herbal, stubborn. She always said it smelled like roots. She wasn't wrong. I sat on the bed, holding the mug in both hands. The crack along the rim caught the light, a small fracture that didn't stop it from holding warmth. I opened my notebook. The first page was blank, I wrote slowly, day 1, banished. Not shocked, only recognized. I stopped, stared at the words until they blurred, then closed the notebook. Outside, the rain kept falling. Somewhere between each drop, I felt something loosen inside me, not forgiveness, not anger. Just the quiet understanding that a woman can disappear from her own life and still be the one holding its weight. Sleep did not visit. I lay on the narrow bed and watched the thin curtain lift and fall with the air from the vent. It sounded like shallow breathing from a stranger in the room. I counted the seconds between each blink of the light on the kettle. I could have turned it off. I let it blink anyway. It felt like proof that something in this place was still keeping time. Near midnight, I tried the television, then turned it off after 2 minutes of a game show audience clapping for a couple who had guessed the price of a blender. The clapping felt wrong in my room. I sat at the small desk instead and opened the notebook again. The pen hesitated at the first line as if the paper could refuse me. I wrote about the porch, the sound of the lock, the weight of rain in the seams of the suitcase. I wrote about Clara as if she were a person I had once seen on a train and never spoken to. It was easier that way. When I finished the page, I dated it with the wrong day. I crossed it out and tried again. The ink bled in one corner and made the numbers look like they were crying. The motel fridge buzzed and went quiet. Somewhere outside, a truck door slammed. The wall clock said 1 in the morning. I brewed another cup of tea and held it close to my face until the steam covered my glasses and turned the room to fog. When I wiped them clean, I could see myself in the mirror above the desk. The crack at the top corner split my face into 2 slightly different women. One looked tired, the other looked patient. My phone lit up on the bed. A message from Clara. 1 sentence. Take your tea kettle and that old mirror. The mirror had been my mother-in-law's gift long ago. I had offered to hang it in the hallway. She said it was too antique, not her style. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. I did not reply. Another message arrived from a number I did not recognize. A photo of my front gate with balloons tied to it and a caption in bright letters. New chapter. I scrolled down. More photos. Clara with friends, glasses raised, gold streamers, a cake with glitter. The comments were light and fast. So proud. Finally free. Cut the cord. I felt the air leave my chest and then return, slow and obedient. I put the phone face down and listened to the vent again. At 2, I called Alvin because the dark was louder than my good sense. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep yet careful. I am sorry, I said. I know the hour. It is all right, he said. Tell me. I want to be sure the withdrawal begins today. No delays. If the bank needs additional forms, I will sign them. If the notary cannot come, I will go to them. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said he would send everything by morning and have a courier bring the originals. I thanked him. He asked me one question before we ended. Do you want her to suffer, Myra? I looked at the kettle light. The tiny glow pulsed like a firefly caught in glass. No, I said. I want the truth to stand by itself for once. It will decide what happens to us. After the call, I tried to sleep again. My mind would not lie down. It walked backward. Walked into a year I never talk about. I did not choose the memory. It chose me. The smell of wet asphalt came first, then the sound of music far away through a closed door, a young woman's laughter. My own phone ringing on the kitchen table while I folded laundry that did not belong to me. I answered, and a voice that did not know me said there had been an accident and asked if I was the mother. I remember the light over the sink was still on. I remember leaving it on when I ran out the door. The memory shifted. Headlights across a field of rain, red and blue flashing like fish in deep water, an officer guiding me under tape. Clara sitting on the curb with a blanket around her shoulders, eyes wide in a face that already wanted to forget. A second car, hood crushed. A woman screaming a name, not mine. I did not see the child. I saw the shape of a small body on a stretcher and the way the paramedic touched a shoulder as if reassuring sleep that it had done enough. The memory made my hands shake, so I went to the sink and washed them as if water could send me back to the present. When I turned off the tap, I heard my own voice return to me from long ago. I told the officer I would take my daughter home. Later, I told a different man in a stiff suit that we would pay what needed to be paid if certain papers stayed quiet. Later still, I told my daughter that this would never happen again, and she nodded and cried into my sweater like a child who had lost her mother in a store and then found her near the candles. I stood in the motel bathroom until the mirror fogged over and I could not see my face at all. I said the words out loud, not to test them, but to move them out of my chest. I am not her enemy. I am not her shield anymore. When I returned to the desk, I opened the notebook and wrote only a few words. 15 years, a storm that never learned to pass. By dawn, the rain had thinned to a quiet thread. I put on my dry sweater and walked down the outside stairs. The parking lot was half empty. A man in a yellow vest swept cigarette butts into a metal shovel and moved like someone who had been awake for a century. I nodded to him. He nodded back. The world kept its promises in small ways. There was a diner next to the gas station across the street. I went in and sat at the counter. A woman with silver hair and steady arms poured coffee for me without asking. The scent of eggs and sugar hung in the air. On the television mounted above the coffee pots, the local news played a story about a traffic jam on the bridge and then a story about a charity drive for school supplies. The world inside the screen looked orderly and possible. My plate arrived with toast cut diagonally. I ate without tasting much. Hunger is more patient than appetite. When I returned to the room, a stack of emails waited. Paperwork from Alvin, a form from the bank, a polite message from a man named Michael who would handle the transfer on the lender side. I sat with my back straight, read every line twice, then signed with the slow care of someone writing a prayer. I sent the scans and placed the originals into the envelope the motel clerk had given me. Her pen had blue flowers printed along the barrel. She had told me she liked to draw on her breaks. I wished I had asked to see the drawings. Once the documents were gone, the room felt lighter, not happy, simply less crowded with unsaid words. I took the kettle and wiped it dry and set it beside the mirror on the desk. I spoke to the mirror as if it were a person who kept secrets and never asked for thanks. "We are almost finished," I said. "Stay with me a little longer." My phone buzzed again. Another message from a number I did not know. A post from someone who had been at the party. The photo showed a wine glass and a handwritten quote on a card that read, "Do not inherit trauma. Burn it." The initials beneath the sentence were Clara's. The comments were quick and bright. Someone wrote about mold growing in dark corners until light finds it. Someone asked if she was talking about her mother. Someone else said they were proud of her for finally choosing herself. I did not feel heat in my face. I did not feel rage. I felt a long line from my throat to my stomach become a straight road, and I stood on it without moving. I looked at the kettle. I thought of Eli at the breakfast table counting blueberries with his finger. I thought of the woman in the other car calling her child's name in the rain. I called Alvin again. He answered on the first ring this time. I told him I wanted to move faster than fast. He said the bank would send formal notice within a week. He said without a guarantor Clara would need to refinance immediately and that her history would make that almost impossible. I thanked him. He asked if I needed anything else. "Yes," I said. "I need you to remember that I tried for years to keep the water level low. Now I am going to let it rise. I will not drown her. I will stand on the shore and watch and pray she learns to float." After the call, I opened the window. The air outside smelled of wet pavement and cold metal. I breathed it in until my chest felt clean. I packed the kettle and the mirror and my notebook into the suitcase and set it by the door. I sat on the bed and closed my eyes and told myself a simple truth that felt like a map. Sometimes love holds an umbrella. Sometimes love puts the umbrella down and lets the lesson rain. Morning smelled like metal and coffee. I woke before the alarm and sat on the edge of the bed, letting the carpet scratch lightly against my bare feet. The motel window was fogged from the inside. I drew a small circle on the glass and watched it fill with light. The email from Alvin had arrived at dawn. Documents attached for withdrawal of co-signature. 6 pages of quiet endings. I printed them downstairs in the lobby, the machine spitting each sheet like it wanted to be done with my story. While the papers cooled, I ate toast from the vending machine. The butter packet refused to open, so I pressed it against the cup of coffee until it softened. A woman passing by with a laundry cart smiled at me as if she could see the exact shape of my exhaustion. Back in the room, I spread the pages on the bed. My name printed beside hers. Myra Ball, Clara Ball, mother and daughter stacked neatly by font size. The legal language was cold, almost kind in its precision. When I signed, the pen dug into the paper. A thin bruise bloomed under each stroke of ink. When I finished, I placed the signed sheets in a folder. It was not relief that came, but an ache behind my ribs, as if some old muscle had just realized it would never be used again. I made tea. Steam rose and turned the room silver for a moment. My phone vibrated against the table, another message from Alvin. "Once you sign, the bank will send notice within 5 business days. She will have 30 to refinance. 30 days. I whispered the number aloud, and the sound tasted like a countdown. I carried the mug to the window. The world outside was damp and ordinary. Trucks rolled past the highway exit. A billboard promised freedom with a picture of a new car. I smiled at the irony. Freedom always had fine print. The mug was still warm in my hands when another memory pushed through, sudden and sharp. Not the night of the crash itself, that would come later, but the morning after. The smell of disinfectant. The white noise of hospital machines. Clara asleep in a chair, dried blood at the corner of her mouth. I remember thinking she looked like a child who had borrowed an adult's face and did not know how to wear it. When she woke, she said she did not remember. She asked if anyone had died. I told her no, though I did not yet know the answer. I remember the way she cried, not from grief but from relief. Then the officer came. I made him wait in the hall. I asked for a few more minutes. I held her hand and promised everything would be fine, even though the word fine felt like a lie we both agreed to tell. I had gone to the woman in the other car 2 days later. She was sitting in a hospital room full of flowers that looked too cheerful for the occasion. Her son's bed was beside hers. He was 5, maybe 6. There were tubes, soft beeping, a smell of strawberry shampoo. I remember apologizing so many times that the word lost shape. I left with her silence wrapped around me like a warning. Back in the motel, the kettle clicked. The present returned with its small, obedient sounds. I sat at the desk and opened my notebook. I wrote, Day 2, signed the papers. The past feels heavier when it becomes legal again. I closed the notebook and let my head fall back against the chair. The ceiling above me was the same pale yellow as the hospital walls from years ago. Some colors never leave you, they just wait in the dark until you turn toward them again. When I finally stood, I noticed the mirror catching light from the window. The crack down its center looked like a map of a road that ended in 2 places at once. I spoke to my reflection quietly. She wanted freedom, I said, but she never learned what it costs. Then softer, neither did I. The phone buzzed again, a new email notification. Alvin's message was brief. Documents received. The withdrawal is now official. I watched the words until they lost meaning. Official. The sound of it was both verdict and absolution. Outside, the clouds broke apart. The first clean ray of sun fell through the curtain, landing on the kettle. The metal shone like something forgiven, though I knew better. Forgiveness is just a pause between storms. I poured another cup of tea and waited for the quiet to settle. It did not. It never really does. I spent most of the day pretending to read. The motel provided a Bible in the drawer, its cover cracked from use. I turned the pages without seeing the words. Every verse seemed to hum the same question. How much does forgiveness cost when you buy it with someone else's ruin? By afternoon, the air outside grew thick. The rain had returned, not as a storm this time, but as a mist that made everything shine. I opened the window and let the damp breeze move through the room. The smell of asphalt and tea mixed into something almost clean. I made a list in my head of all the things I had left behind. My daughter's laughter, my grandson's drawings, the feeling of belonging to a room. The mirror on the desk caught my attention again. I lifted it and wiped the dust with the hem of my sleeve. The reflection was cloudy, as if memory itself lived inside the glass. I placed it on my lap and stared at the crack until it began to look like a scar, and that scar became a road leading straight into the past. 15 years ago. The sound came first. Screeching tires. Then the weightless pause before impact, the kind of silence that swallows everything. I was home that night, folding laundry in the small house I used to rent by the bay. The phone rang once, then twice. By the 3rd ring, I already knew it was bad. When I reached the hospital, the waiting room was full of fluorescent light and people who looked like ghosts of themselves. A nurse led me to a corner where Clara sat wrapped in a silver blanket. She was shaking, not from cold, but from the way shock rearranges the body. Her hair was matted with rain and blood. She kept saying, I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to. The officer was young, maybe 25. He spoke carefully like a man stepping around broken glass. He said she had driven through an intersection too fast. The other car had spun twice before stopping against a light pole. A child had been inside. The boy was alive, barely. The mother had broken ribs, a wrist, a voice that would not stop screaming her child's name. I remember asking what would happen next. He said the prosecutor would review the case. There was talk of reckless driving, alcohol, possible jail time. I remember nodding as if I were in a meeting about someone else's mistake. Later that night, when Clara finally slept, I walked outside to the hospital parking lot and cried until I could breathe again. I looked up at the sky and promised whoever was listening that I would fix it. And I did. I found the mother. Her name was Laurel. I brought soup and money and letters of apology. I sat on her porch for hours until she finally opened the door. Her face was a map of exhaustion and fury. I told her about my daughter's dreams, about how young she was, how one moment could ruin a lifetime. I said I would pay every bill, every cent. I said we would disappear if she wished. She stared at me for a long time, then she asked one question. Would you still be here if it had been your boy in that car? I had no answer. The settlement took months. I drained my savings, sold my car, borrowed from friends who never asked why. The court kept it quiet. There was no article, no photograph, only paperwork sealed and filed under someone else's name. Clara promised she would change. She stopped driving for a year. She got a job at a small cafe, met Kyle, smiled again. I thought maybe the worst had turned into a lesson. For a while, it almost felt true, but guilt is a patient weed. It grows quietly under kindness until one day it bursts through the floorboards. When she started calling me by my first name instead of Mom, I knew the cracks had returned. She said it sounded more balanced. She said therapy told her she needed space from the person who made her feel small. I was the person who erased her mugshot, and somehow that made me the enemy. Back in the motel room, I opened the folder of mortgage documents again. The lines of text seemed to blur into the hospital lights of that night. Signing papers to save her then. Signing papers to let her fall now. The symmetry almost hurt. The phone rang. Alvin's number, I answered. I just received confirmation, he said. Everything is filed. The bank will notify her within the week. Thank you, I whispered. He hesitated. Myra, I have to ask, why now? I looked at the mirror on the desk. My reflection was split in half, mother and stranger. Because she believes she built that house on healing, I said. But it was built on debt, on lies, on my name. She needs to see what happens when the foundation is taken away. That's going to destroy her, he said quietly. No, I replied. It will free her. Real freedom doesn't come with applause. When we hung up, I sat by the window and watched cars move along the highway, their lights dragging gold lines through the mist. I imagined each driver heading home, unaware of the invisible threads holding their lives together, the signatures, the sacrifices, the quiet mothers who fixed what should have broken. I thought of Clara at 20, her head on my shoulder after the accident, whispering, I don't deserve you. Maybe she was right. Maybe she never did. I took the mirror in my hands one last time. The crack ran down my face again, dividing me from myself. I traced it with my finger and said, it's done. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away, a slow reminder that storms never vanish. They just circle back when the air grows still enough to remember. I closed the notebook and wrote the final line for the day, day 2. The past is awake again, and this time, it knows my name. Then I turned off the light. By late afternoon, the rain turned from a curtain to a fine glitter you could almost pretend was light. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and watched it bead on the window, tiny silver coins that never fell. The room hummed the way small rooms hum when they have held too many secrets. I boiled water and let the kettle click off. Then I waited another minute because sometimes I like the sound of waiting. My phone lit up on the table. A notification from a woman I barely remembered. Her name showed up with a heart in front of it, the kind of decoration people add when they want even their names to smile. The preview was a cluster of gold streamers and a caption that made my stomach tight. To fresh starts and brighter air. I told myself not to open it. I opened it anyway. The first video was shaky and full of laughter. A front gate I knew, tied with balloons like a child's birthday party. Through the camera, you could hear someone say finally, followed by a long, slow cheer. The second clip was the front room, the furniture pushed back, a glitter banner across the wall. Out with the old. The letters caught the light and turned white every time the phone moved. In the corner, someone had set up a small table with a sign written in pretty loops, Leave your wishes. A stack of cards waited beside a glass bowl full of pens that looked like metal flowers. Clara was in the third video. She stood by the kitchen island wearing a dress I had never seen, something soft and clean that matched the new plants I did not recognize. She looked beautiful. She always has. When she laughed, her head tipped back the same way it did when she was 16, and sure the world would clap on cue. She lifted a glass and the room went quiet with the practice of it. To the new energy in this house, she said. To boundaries, to peace, to choosing ourselves. There was applause, easy and warm. Someone shouted, say it. She smiled the smile she uses when she believes the air is her ally. She lifted the glass a little higher and said, to cutting the cord that kept me small. I watched her drink and then hold the glass like a microphone. She thanked people for coming. She thanked them for loving her through the hard season. She thanked them for reminding her she did not have to carry the past around like a suitcase. I looked at my own suitcase by the door. The video ended and another began, this one a slow pan over the cake. White frosting, pale gold ribbon, letters in sugar. New chapter. Around it were bowls of berries and tiny cookies shaped like stars. Someone had baked them with care. I hoped they were kind in real life and not only in icing. The next post was a photo of the living room from a different angle. The rug I bought last winter had been rolled away. In its place was a temporary dance floor made of black panels that clicked together like thoughts becoming decisions. A playlist pulsed through the speakers, the kind of songs that promise every chorus is a door. People moved in and out of the frame like happy weather. I told myself to put the phone down. I did not. A new video started. My daughter again, now beside the wish table. She pulled a card and read it for the camera. I could not see the handwriting, only the smile that widened as she spoke. "Do not inherit trauma. Burn it," she giggled softly. "I love that." She turned the card, and in the corner I saw 2 small letters written in ink, CB her initials. It was her own sentence. For a moment I could not hear the music. I heard only the soft sound a heart makes when it folds itself smaller to fit inside a new shape. There were comments under the posts. "Proud of you. Took long enough. Cut the mold from the corners and let the light in." Someone asked if this meant she was finally free of me. The answer was a string of sparkles and a laughing face and a small flame. The polite way of saying yes. I put the phone face down and listened to the kettle cool. When the metal stopped ticking, the room felt too quiet, and I realized the noise I missed was the sound of Eli's feet. He used to run through that living room pretending the rug was a river and the couch was a boat. He would hand me a pillow and say, "Get on before the water gets you." I would climb the boat, and the 2 of us would float for as long as his imagination let us. I wondered where he was tonight. The last clip showed a bedroom I recognized as his. The bed had been made with a new duvet covered in constellations that did not match the stickers we put on the ceiling last year. A woman off camera whispered that he was at a sleepover, which is what people say when they want the house to glow without interruption. I tried to be glad he was not there to hear what the walls would remember. The phone buzzed again. A private message from another name I knew only from borrowed holidays and awkward toasts. She had attached a still frame of Clara standing under the banner with her arms open like a sermon. Underneath, a caption: "When we remove the parasite, we finally breathe." I ran my finger along the edge of the table until I found the small nick I left when I unpacked the kettle. I pressed there until the dull pain pushed the room back into focus. I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth the way Eli's teacher taught him to calm his thunder. It worked. A little. I made tea and carried it to the window. Outside, the rain was a suggestion, not a warning. Cars moved along the road like thoughts that had places to be. One of them carried the courier with the original copies I signed this morning. Another carried the man who would place them on a desk and stamp them without looking at my name. Another, somewhere, would carry a letter toward my daughter with the bank's crest in the corner. Life is a conveyor belt. We add small weights and hope they reach the right hands. I sat on the bed with my knees tucked under me and opened the notebook. I wrote "I am not a parasite" and felt foolish for needing to write it. I crossed out the sentence and tried again. "I am a woman who once believed love could erase a record." I closed the notebook and set it aside. I picked up the phone again for reasons that had nothing to do with wisdom. The party had moved outside now. The camera showed the backyard strung with lights, the kind of small glass bulbs that make everyone look softer than they are. People stood in little galaxies of conversation. Clara stood near the fence with 2 friends from her wellness group. The caption listed their names and a word after each one: healer, breathwork, coach. Their laughter rose and fell in bright waves. The friend with the long earrings said something about how some families mistake dependence for love. Another said sometimes the most loving thing we can do is burn the rope. Clara nodded like she had invented the idea. I realized then that she had always been a collector of phrases. She took them in and wore them like borrowed coats. Tonight she had every coat on at once, and she still looked cold to me. The camera moved closer. I could hear her voice clearly. It was warm and cert, the voice of a woman who knows where to place her hands when she speaks. She said, "I do not hate her. I just refuse to be small." Her friends agreed. Someone clapped. I imagined the kitchen light flicking on and off, the way it did when the wiring argued with the weather. I imagined the little chip in the tile near the sink where I dropped a bowl and blamed it on my own clumsiness, even though my hands had been steady. I imagined how the house would answer if anyone asked it who had kept it alive all these years. When the video ended, I turned the phone off and slid it under the pillow as if that could stop the world. It did not, but it quieted. I poured the tea into the small sink and watched the brown swirl around the drain like a tiny galaxy deciding which way to spin. My door knocked softly. I considered not answering. Then I did. The clerk stood there with a small envelope and a careful smile. "Delivery for MS Ball," she said. I thanked her and closed the door. The envelope held the bank's cover letter and the stamped copies of my withdrawal. The paper felt heavier than paper should. I placed it on the desk, then moved it an inch to the left, then back to the right, as if the right position could make the future kinder. I sat and read every line again. My name, her name, the clause that said 30 days, the notice that said obligations transfer in full to the remaining borrower, the sentence that looked gentlest and was not gentle at all. Failure to act will result in default. I set the papers down and looked out the window. The motel sign flickered and steadied. A couple argued in the parking lot and then laughed in the same breath. Somewhere far off a train called to no one in particular. The world did what it always does. It kept being the world. I thought of calling Clara, to warn her, to ask if Eli was wearing socks, to tell her to drink water between glasses of wine because mornings always collect the dead of nights. I did none of those things. I folded my hands in my lap and let my fingers learn the shape of patience. When I finally stood, I walked to the mirror and tilted it until my face was whole again, even with the crack. "I am not your mistake," I told the woman in the glass. "I am the one who stayed." My phone buzzed one more time. A live video had begun. I did not click it. I could hear the noise anyway through the thin walls of the night, cheers rising, music asking people to be endless. A voice, my daughter, counting down to something that felt important to her in this hour and would feel like a bruise in the morning. I turned off the lamp and lay back on the bed. The ceiling was the color of milk about to boil. I watched it and waited for sleep. It did not come. Instead, a slow memory did, dressed in the humid air of an old summer. I remembered the first time Clara laughed after the accident. We were on a bus because I had sold the car. She held a paper cup of melted ice and told me a joke she had read on the back of a cereal box. It was not funny. We laughed until we cried anyway because laughter was cheaper than anything else that day. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I do not deserve you." I kissed the top of her hair and decided to deserve us both. The motel fridge hummed. The city breathed. From somewhere distant, the live video ended and the phone went still. I closed my eyes and said a prayer without words, the kind that moves through the body like warm water. When morning comes, I will sign whatever else needs signing. I will stand where the truth stands and I will not move. I will not be cruel. I will not be kind in the way that makes lies comfortable. I will be a quiet doorway the storm must pass through. The kettle clicked in the silence, as if agreeing. I slept for an hour with my shoes still on. In my dream, I was standing in my kitchen while snow fell through the ceiling in soft, slow flakes. I held out my hands to catch them, but they melted before they reached my palms. When I woke, the room was warm and the window held a sky the color of steel. Another day was waiting at the door, polite and impossible to refuse. I made tea, opened the notebook, and wrote 3 words. "She is celebrating." Then I added a 4th. "Not yet." I closed the book and set it beside the envelope on the desk. The 2 rectangles looked like small doors. I decided to walk through both. I put on my coat and stepped into the hall. The carpet whispered under my feet. A houseplant leaned toward a strip of sun in the stairwell. I put my hand on the rail and went down, not fast, not slow, the pace of a woman who has learned that nothing good breaks when you stop running. Outside, the rain had forgotten how to fall. The air smelled rinsed. Cars sighed by in long exhale. I stood for a moment and let the day arrange itself around me. Then I went to mail what needed mailing. On the way back, I bought a pack of chalk from the corner store. 6 colors sat in a clear box like candy. I did not know why I wanted them. I only knew that when a storm is building, it helps to have something that leaves a harmless mark. I set the chalk on the desk next to the papers and the notebook and the kettle and the mirror. 4 instruments. Truth, memory, warmth, reflection. I touched each one with a fingertip as if counting blessings that were also burdens. I waited. I drank tea. I waited some more. By evening, the first of the bank's automated emails arrived confirming receipt of my withdrawal. The second said the borrower of record would be notified. The third said a physical letter would follow. The party had become a gallery of still photographs. In one, Clara blew out a candle and someone shouted, "Make a wish." In another, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear the way she used to do before exams. In the last, she stood alone by the sliding glass door looking out into the yard, where the string lights made perfect circles of gold on the wet grass. She was smiling in a way that almost looked like peace. I held my breath without meaning to. I let it go. The night stepped closer to morning. Somewhere a printer in an office made of glass began to whisper a letter into existence. Somewhere a courier checked his route. Somewhere a mailbox opened its red metal mouth to wait for a heavy envelope. I washed my cup. I turned the mirror flat so it looked like a small, silent lake. I touched the chalk and left a faint line on the desk. I told myself I would sleep. When I finally did, it was the light, careful sleep of a person who knows the next sound might change the shape of a life. By the time morning returned, the world had the stillness of a photograph after applause. I woke to the sound of a truck backing up outside the motel and the small hiss of the coffee pot in the lobby below. The first thing I saw was the envelope on the desk, the edge of it curling slightly from the night's humidity. I knew the letter had already started its slow journey to her mailbox. I made tea and sat at the window. The motel sign blinked on and off, still fighting the daylight. Across the parking lot, a man cleaned his windshield with a piece of cloth too small for the job. He stopped, looked at the sky, and shrugged, as if even he understood that some stains were meant to stay. When the tea cooled, I checked my phone. 17 new posts tagged under her name. The party had lasted until dawn. Someone filmed them lighting lanterns in the backyard. One floated upward, tangled briefly in the branches of the oak before freeing itself and disappearing into the fog. The caption read, "Let the old stories burn." I watched it twice. There was a moment, just before the lantern rose, when Clara looked down at her hands, the flame flickering near her skin. She smiled, but it was small, uncertain, like the body remembering something the mind refused to say aloud. I paused the video there and stared until my eyes blurred. The bank email arrived at 9. The tone was polite, detached, the kind of civility that always precedes disaster. Notification of pending refinance requirement. The attached document showed her full name, address, the countdown already marked in bold. 30 days. I scrolled to the end where my signature used to be and found the space empty. A white void where I had existed. I closed the laptop and whispered, "You wanted the cord cut. It is." Around noon, I drove into town. The highway curved between fields slick with yesterday's rain. Everything smelled of wet grass and diesel. At a red light, I saw a family in the next lane, 2 kids fighting over a bag of chips while their mother reached back to make peace. The smallest things people fight over before the real storms come. I looked away. The post office was nearly empty. The clerk, a young man with a birthmark shaped like a question mark near his chin, weighed the envelope I carried and asked if I wanted tracking. I told him yes. Watching something move toward someone else felt like control. He stamped the form and slid it back. "It'll reach by Monday," he said. I nodded. Monday, the first day of the week that would start undoing her house. Outside, the air was warm enough for insects to hum near the drains. I bought a sandwich from a stand across the street and ate it on a bench facing the water tower. The bread tasted of salt and memory. I thought of all the lunches I packed for her in high school, each one sealed with a note she pretended not to read. "You are loved. You are brave. You can come home if you need to." She never brought any of them back. The sun slid behind a curtain of clouds. A shadow stretched across the lot like a slow tide. I finished the sandwich and walked back to the car. When I returned to the motel, the desk clerk handed me a small parcel. "Delivered while you were out," she said. Inside was a framed photograph wrapped in tissue paper. It was of Eli and me sitting on the porch last Christmas. His smile was wide, full of missing teeth. On the back of the frame, she had written in her neat, rounded handwriting, "He misses you, but he needs space too." For a long minute, I couldn't move. Then I set the photo on the dresser facing the wall. Some love has to be stored like that, backward, for safety. The evening brought thunder again, faint and far away. I poured tea and opened the notebook. The words came slow, like strangers at a door deciding if they were welcome. Day 3. The letter is on its way. She thinks freedom is lightness. She does not know it is gravity. It pulls until it teaches you how to fall. I set down the pen and looked at the kettle. The red light glowed steadily. The sound reminded me of the oxygen machine in the hospital 15 years ago. The same patient rhythm, the same promise that something invisible was keeping the world breathing. When the first drops of rain began again, I opened the window. The smell of wet earth rose like memory itself. Somewhere out there, my daughter was probably cleaning up confetti, emptying glasses, laughing with the tired joy that comes after performing happiness too long. I whispered into the wind, "You will understand one day when the noise stops." The thunder answered, low and unhurried. I turned off the light and sat on the bed with the photograph still face down on the dresser. The rain thickened until it sounded like applause from far away, polite and endless. Tomorrow, the notice would arrive. And somewhere between her mailbox and her heartbeat, the story would change direction. The letter reached her on a Wednesday morning. I knew because she called me 4 times before noon. The first 3 I let ring, the 4th I answered. Her voice arrived jagged, half breath, half disbelief. "Mom, what did you do?" I said nothing at first. The silence stretched, taut, and deliberate. I could hear wind chimes through her end of the line, the same ones I bought from a roadside stall years ago. They were still hanging, still singing, unaware that they belonged to no one now. "You pulled your name from the mortgage," she said. "They told me you did. They said the bank's moving to seize the property if I don't refinance in 30 days. I don't have the credit, I can't do this right now." Her words came like rain on glass, fast, frantic, repeating themselves. "I didn't think you'd actually, Mom. I thought you were bluffing." "I don't bluff," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. It startled even me. "You can't just do this. This is my home." "Our home," I corrected, "once." She went quiet. The pause that followed wasn't shock, it was calculation. I could almost hear her mind searching for the argument that would make me soften. "You're punishing me," she said finally, "because I asked you to leave, because I wanted a life that didn't revolve around your guilt." "No," I said softly. "I'm not punishing you, I'm letting the truth breathe." "What truth?" she snapped. "That you can't stand to see me happy? That you were never supposed to afford that house on your own," I said. There was a sound, small but sharp, like a glass being set down too hard. Then she whispered, "You're unbelievable." "I told you," I said, "freedom has fine print." She hung up. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Then I placed it face down on the desk beside the kettle. My hands were steady, but the tea I poured sloshed slightly against the rim. I wasn't trembling. The world was. That afternoon, I went for a walk along the service road behind the motel. The sky was a heavy bruise of gray. Cars hissed by, carrying people with cleaner endings than mine. I thought of her standing in that bright kitchen now, pulling open drawers, counting bills, realizing for the first time how fragile the floor under her feet really was. I thought of Eli. His small sneakers by the front door, his drawings still taped to the refrigerator. I wondered what story she would tell him about why Grandma didn't live there anymore. I reached the end of the road where the pavement stopped and the dirt began. Beyond it was a wide field, the grass wet and tall. I sat on a flat rock and let the wind push against my face until I could almost feel it rearrange me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Alvin. "She called me," he said before I could greet him. "She's furious, said you're ruining her life." "I'm not ruining anything," I said. "I just stopped paying for the illusion." He sighed. "Myra, this will escalate. She might take legal action. Are you prepared for that?" "If she does," I said, "then we tell the whole story." "Myra," I cut him off. "I have the police report, the settlement papers, every check I wrote. I kept them all. If she wants to drag me to court, then the truth comes with us." There was silence on his end, the kind that means agreement disguised as concern. Finally, he said, "Then I'll start preparing the files." When the call ended, I looked at the horizon. The clouds had started to move apart, slow and cautious, like curtains after a play that no one applauded. The first thin stripe of sunlight touched the wet grass, and the whole field shimmered as if it had just remembered how to exist. I walked back to the motel with my shoes soaked and my mind heavy but clear. There is a kind of peace that only comes when you stop pretending kindness is the same as mercy. The next morning, I woke to another message. A voicemail this time. Her voice was smaller now, thinner. "Mom, please, I'm sorry I yelled. I didn't mean what I said. It's just everything's happening so fast. They said I need a cosigner again, and you're the only one who can help. Please just come back for a meeting. We can talk. I'll make tea." Tea. The word landed like a ghost on the bed beside me. She had never made me tea in her life. I didn't reply. I let the voicemail sit in the inbox like a seed that would never sprout. At noon, Alvin called again. "She wants to negotiate," he said. "Meet at the bank maybe next week." "No," I said. "There's nothing to negotiate. I already signed everything that matters." He hesitated. "You really won't go?" "I've already been to every courtroom that counts," I said. "The one inside me." He didn't argue. He just said he understood, even if he didn't. That night, the rain returned, heavy and absolute. The wind shook the window pane like an impatient hand. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, listening. Each gust sounded like the past trying to come back in. I whispered, "You can't." For the first time in years, I believed it. I went to bed and dreamed of water again, but this time it wasn't drowning me. It was carrying something away. The storm moved on without apology. By morning, the air felt rinsed and thin, as if the night had taken something with it and left a gap I could finally breathe through. I made tea and stood by the window with the cup in both hands until the heat settled into my fingers. The envelope with the stamped copies lay where I had left it. I slid it into my bag the way a person carries a relic to a shrine. Before noon, she called again. I let it ring to the edge of voicemail and then picked up. "Are you coming to the bank or not?" she asked. No greeting, no breath between the words. "No," I said. "You want to see me homeless," she said. "Just say it. Say it to my face instead of hiding behind lawyers." "I do not want you homeless," I said. "I want you honest." "I am honest," she said. "I am living my truth." "Your truth does not pay the mortgage," I said, "and it does not change the past." Silence pressed against my ear. In the quiet, I could hear the soft tick of the kitchen clock where she stood. It was the same clock I once set 5 minutes fast to help Eli get to school on time. "Tell me what you want," she said finally. "Tell me the price for putting your name back." "There is no price," I said, "only a debt no one can pay for you." She made a small sound, a laugh with broken edges. "So this is a lesson," she said. "You want to teach me how fragile my world is? Congratulations, I learned it. Put your name back." "I will not," I said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I will take you to court." "If you do," I said, "I will bring the files." "What files?" she asked, but I could hear in the tremor that she already knew which ones. I did not answer. I ended the call and placed the phone on the table as if it were something that might bruise. I walked to the dresser, lifted the mirror, and tucked it into the tote with the envelope and the notebook. Then I left the room and went down the stairs into a noon that had finally remembered how to be bright. The courthouse was 15 minutes away. I drove with the windows barely open and the radio off. The parking lot was full of the usual congregation of errands and endings. A woman with a stack of forms balanced on a clipboard hurried past me with determination that looked like hope. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of toner and floor wax. I asked the clerk for a filing window. She pointed to a counter where a man in a navy tie shuffled papers with the ease of someone who likes rules because they stand still. I placed the envelope on the ledge and said I wanted to add supporting documentation to a potential custody matter and also to make a declaration regarding a prior civil settlement in the interest of candor. He looked up in mild surprise. "Do you have a case number?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "You will soon." He nodded and took the envelope. "These will be stamped and sealed," he said. "Do you want a copy for your records?" "Yes," I said. While he walked to the back, I stood in the pool of light that fell through the high windows and felt a kind of stillness take root in me. Not triumph. There is no triumph in summoning old ghosts. It was closer to relief. The kind that arrives when a hand finally loosens after years of holding a door shut against a storm no one else can hear. The clerk returned with 2 stacks. He slid one to me and kept the other. "Anything else?" he asked. I looked at the date stamped in red on the top page. It felt like the exact weight of an era. "That is all," I said. Outside, the sky had brightened into a clear blue that made the courthouse columns look impossibly clean. I sat on the steps and called Alvin. "It is done," I told him. He did not ask what I meant. He only said, "All right, if they file, we will be ready." I started to answer, but another call flashed across the screen. Her name. I let Alvin go and answered. "What did you do?" she said. The question came out as a hiss. She already knew. "I told the truth," I said. "You filed something," she said. "Your friend at the bank said a note was added to the account, something about disclosure if this goes to court. Is that what you call truth now? Slandering your own child?" "I cannot slander facts," I said. "I can only carry them to the light." Her breath went jagged. I heard a chair scrape against tile. "You promised me," she said. "You promised that night that we would never speak of it again." "I promised to save you from prison," I said, "not from consequence." "So you want to ruin me," she said. "You want to watch me burn." "I want you to stop pretending the fire is a candle," I said. She laughed then, a hard laugh that broke in the middle. "You talk like a saint," she said. "You are not a saint. You are a bitter woman who cannot stand to be irrelevant." There it was, the sentence she had been sharpening for years. It did not land. It fell at my feet like a dull knife. "I am very relevant to a boy who needs stability," I said. "If the house goes, he will need a bed that does not move, and I will give it to him." "If you touch my son," she said, and the threat rushed toward me like a wind against a door. "I will not touch," I said. "I will hold, until you can." She made a sound I could not place, a kind of grief that had not learned the difference between pleading and rage. Then the line went dead. I stayed on the courthouse steps for a long time. People came and went with folders pressed to their chests like armor. A mother carried a toddler who kept reaching for the sunlight with both hands. Somewhere, a bell rang that was not a bell, only a truck alerting the world to its wide turn. Life did what it always does. It kept moving even when the part of you that mattered most had stopped somewhere in a memory and refused to follow. I went back to the motel and placed the stamped copies in the drawer with the Bible. I set the mirror back on the desk and tilted it until the crack made a clean line through my jaw. I spoke aloud, not to myself, but to the air that had carried other women through their own final truths. I am not your enemy, I said. I am the wall that kept the flood from taking you. I am stepping aside. My phone lit up with a new message. This time it was not from her. It was a link from a name I had not seen in years. Laurel, the aunt of the little boy. The subject line said, "Only because it is time." The link led to a blog I did not know she kept. There was a single post on the front page. The first paragraph was simple. It did not accuse, it remembered. It told the story of a night in rain and of a girl driving too fast and of a mother who paid what she could to save what she loved. The words sat like stones on a river bed. Clear water moved above them. I read to the end and set the phone down. I could have written to her. I did not. I brewed tea instead and watched steam rise in tight small spirals that uncoiled and vanished. That is the way truth behaves when it is finally spoken. It leaves the body and becomes air. Near evening, the bank placed a notice on the account. I knew because the automated portal sent an alert. Inspection scheduled. I pictured a man in a navy suit walking up our old driveway with a clipboard and a measured step, tapping the frame of a door I painted the summer Eli discovered dragonflies. I imagined him lifting the lockbox lid and setting a small brass key inside. Procedure looks gentle when you do not know its teeth. The phone rang once more before dark. Her voice was smaller. "Mom," she said, "please, I have Eli. I do not know where we will go." I closed my eyes. The motel room smelled of tea and rain and the dust of old carpets. I wanted to go get him at that moment, to carry him to the motel and let him fall asleep with his hand in mine the way he used to do on storm nights. I wanted to tell her we could fix it if she would just stop fighting the air. Love reached for me with both hands. I did not move. "You will find a place," I said gently. "You are his mother." "What if I cannot?" she whispered. "Then I will keep him until you can," I said. "This is not theft, this is shelter." She did not answer. I heard only her breathing. It slowed, it shuddered, it steadied. Then she said a word I had not heard from her in a long time. "Please." I let the word sit between us. I let it mean everything and nothing. "Start with the bank," I said. "Ask for a budget counselor. Cancel the gym. Sell the extra set of dishes. Call the landlord on 4th Street who liked you last year. Tell the truth when you apply. If you cannot say it to me, say it to someone who signs the forms." She drew breath to argue. The breath became silence. The call ended in a quiet click that sounded almost like surrender. I put the phone down and turned the mirror face down so it became only a rectangle of wood. I lay on the bed without undressing and stared at the ceiling until the pale paint turned the color of water at dusk. In my mind, I walked through the house one last time. The rug was back in place. The wish table was gone. The banner had been folded and put back into the plastic box with the holiday lights. In the kitchen, the clock ticked toward a future it did not understand. I slept. My dream was simple. I stood at the edge of a field of tall grass and watched wind move through it in long brown waves. A child ran ahead of me, chasing something I could not see. He turned back to make sure I was there. I lifted my hand. He laughed and kept running. Morning would bring forms and phone calls and the cold stares of a building where decisions pretend to be neutral. It would also bring a cup of tea, a blue sky, and the small fact of breath moving in and out. I let that be enough. I let the world be what it was. I let the storm do what it came to do. In the first light, I wrote in the notebook. Day 4, I filed the truth. If she goes to court, the door is already open. If she comes to me as a mother, I will open another. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and rain. The walls were lined with clocks that all told slightly different times. I sat on a bench outside the chamber, the folder on my lap, my palms flat on its cover. Across from me, a vending machine buzzed and blinked with quiet confidence, offering sweetness to anyone who still believed in comfort. Alvin sat beside me, scrolling through his phone, glasses halfway down his nose. "They'll call us soon," he said. I nodded. My reflection stared back from the glass of the vending machine, smaller, older, yet steadier than I remembered. The clerk opened the door and called our names. Inside, the courtroom was a study in silence. Pale light from the skylight fell across the tables like mercy deciding where to land. Clara was already there with her lawyer, a woman in a sharp navy suit who smelled faintly of citrus. My daughter wouldn't look at me. Her hands were clasped, her knuckles pale against the wooden table. The judge adjusted his glasses. "We are here to determine temporary guardianship and assess the matter of default property." His tone was even, but each word felt like a stone dropped into still water. "Mrs. Ball, you may begin." Her lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has suffered a deliberate act of financial sabotage by her mother. We intend to show that the withdrawal of co-signature was done with malicious intent, jeopardizing both her child's welfare and her financial stability. I felt Alvin shift beside me, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Let her finish," I whispered. The lawyer continued, voice crisp as glass. "This is not about property, it's about punishment. My client's mother has weaponized legality to control her. We will ask the court to restore her as co-signer and grant full custody of the minor, Eli Ball, to his mother." The judge turned to Alvin. "Response?" He stood, calm, patient, careful. "Your Honor, the documents my client filed were entirely legal. The mortgage in question was voluntarily co-signed 15 years ago and withdrawn in accordance with bank policy. My client has no intent to destroy her daughter's life. She merely seeks transparency and, if necessary, protection for her grandson." The judge's gaze returned to me. "Do you wish to speak, Mrs. Ball?" I rose. "Yes, Your Honor." The wood under my hand was cool. My voice surprised me. It came out steady, almost kind. "I didn't remove my name to punish my daughter. I did it because my name no longer belonged there. I have been paying for things that are not mine to pay anymore." Clara finally looked up. Her eyes were red, shining, furious. "You're lying," she said. "No," I said softly. "I'm remembering." The lawyer interjected. "Your Honor, we have no evidence of misconduct on my client's part. My client was financially independent until this withdrawal." I opened the folder. Inside, neatly stacked, were the papers I had carried like a second spine for 15 years. The settlement, the checks, the statement of civil resolution, the insurance letters, all of it, I laid them on the table. The sound of paper against wood filled the room like a quiet confession. The judge glanced up. "What is this?" "The record," I said, "of a night 15 years ago." Clara froze, her lawyer frowned. "Your Honor, we object." "Overruled," the judge said. "Let her speak." I looked at my daughter. "You were 20, you drove home in the rain after a party. You were tired, you didn't see the other car. A boy was hurt. I paid for the silence that saved you. I used my name to seal it. Every bill, every therapy session, every whisper of that night, my name stood between you and a prison cell." Her face drained of color. "Stop," she whispered. "Please, Mom, stop." "I didn't. You built your house on my debt. You called it healing. You called it new energy. But the ground beneath you was guilt I carried so you could walk." Her lawyer stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the financial dispute." The judge raised a hand. "It is relevant if it speaks to motive." Clara's breath came fast and uneven. She was shaking. "You're cruel," she said. "You're destroying everything." "I'm giving you the truth," I said. "You can build again, but this time on something real." The judge leaned back. "I've heard enough for now." He looked at both of us, then at the folder. "The matter of the mortgage will proceed as filed. Temporary guardianship of the minor will be assigned to Mrs. Ball pending a full custody review." The words fell into the room like snow. Slow, cold, irreversible. Clara rose suddenly. "You can't take him from me." "I'm not taking him," I said. "I'm keeping him safe until the house isn't collapsing around him." The bailiff moved closer, hand out gently. Alvin whispered, "Sit down, Myra," but I was already sitting. I didn't need to win. I only needed the truth to be spoken aloud where silence had lived too long. When the gavel struck wood, Clara turned to me with eyes that were no longer angry, just hollow. "You ruined me," she said, then she left. The hallway outside felt enormous after the echo of the courtroom. I sat on the bench again, my hands empty now. Alvin gathered the papers. "You knew this would happen," he said. "Yes," I said, "but I didn't know it would hurt this much." He hesitated. "She'll come around." I shook my head. She has to fall before she learns to stand. I walked out into the parking lot. The sky was overcast, but there was a gap in the clouds where light poured through like forgiveness trying to find a place to land. I stood there until the drizzle softened into mist. That night, I made Eli dinner pasta with too much cheese, just how he liked it. He asked where his mother was. I said she needed to fix some things before she came home. He nodded solemnly, as if he understood more than any 7-year-old should. After he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table of the small rented house I had moved into that week. The air smelled faintly of lemon soap. The mirror leaned against the wall beside me, the crack catching the light like a scar that refused to fade. I opened my notebook. Day 5, truth is a verdict you deliver to yourself before anyone else does. Today it arrived in a courtroom with my daughter's name on it. The silence is over. The dead is awake, but I am still standing. I closed the notebook and looked out the window. Across the street, the world carried on. A man walked his dog. A porch light flicked on. Someone laughed into a phone. I realized the rain had stopped, not because the sky was kind, but because it was tired too. I whispered into the quiet, "It's done." But the wind that slipped through the crack of the window said otherwise. It said almost. The post appeared on a Tuesday before noon, as if truth preferred office hours. I was washing the single plate that held my breakfast when the phone shook across the counter. A name I had not seen in years filled the screen. Laurel. I dried my hands on the edge of a dish towel and opened the message. Only because it is time, she had typed. Then a link. The page was plain. No ads, no flashing banners. Just a white field and black words laid out with the care of someone who has carried them a very long way. The first line said there was once a boy in our family who did not walk for almost a year. The lines that followed did not accuse, they remembered. A rainy night, an intersection, a young woman who drove too fast, a mother who paid so that the world would speak softly. There were no names, there did not need to be. The shape fit us like a dress you already own. When I finished reading, I did not move. The kettle clicked in the background as it cooled. Outside the window, a man carried a ladder across the street and leaned it carefully against a pale blue house. The world had the same steady posture it always had, and that felt both wrong and merciful. Within an hour, the page had thousands of views. I knew because Laurel wrote again. I did not expect it to spread. "Are you all right?" I told her yes. That was almost true. By early afternoon, the links began to multiply. Screenshots of the post landed on sites I had never heard of. People shared it with short captions that sounded like gongs. So this is the story, so this is the truth. Threads unspooled like old rope. Some wrote with fury, some wrote with care. A few wrote with kindness and still managed to cut. My phone lit with calls I did not answer. A number from the local paper. Then a station in Portland. Then a reporter who said he wanted to hold space for my voice. There is always someone who wants to hold space for your voice if your voice can help their time slot. I turned the phone face down and made tea. The steam rose as if walking itself out of a body. When I lifted the cup, I saw my reflection curve on the surface. It looked like the face of someone who has loved a person that broke her and found a way to love the truth more. I placed the cup beside the mirror and sat with both. The crack in the glass drew a clean silver line through my jaw. I thought of the day I had first tucked that mirror into a moving box. I had told myself I would hang it in the hallway so the house could check its own face. I never did. The wall never felt ready for a witness. By mid-afternoon, a friend from the church I used to attend forwarded me a photo that was traveling through message groups and private accounts. It was one of Clara's advertisements for a retreat in the desert. She stood on a rock with her hands lifted, and the sky behind her did the kind of work that makes everyone believe in redemption. Over the image, someone had placed a single sentence in red letters: "Who healed the healer?" I wanted to answer. A woman who had run out of names to give herself. I walked to the small park behind the library. The grass was damp but warm. A pair of teenagers tried to teach a dog to pretend it was a horse. The dog did not cooperate. I sat on a bench under a maple tree and watched the leaves shift like slow fire. When the phone rang again, I answered because the caller ID was a number I recognized without reading. Alvin. He did not wait to speak. "It is everywhere," he said. "I know," I said. "They will reach out to you," he said. "Be cautious." "I will be silent," I said. "You do not have to be silent," he countered. "I have spoken where it mattered," I said. "Paper and judges, a boy who needs sleep. The rest is just a room that wants to hear itself echo." He was quiet for a moment. "Your silence will look like pride to some people," he said. "It is not pride," I said. "It is restraint. It is choosing to let a truth stand without my hands on it." When I ended the call, I stared at the clouds moving like a polite parade. The teenagers cheered because the dog finally jumped over a line of chalk. I smiled even though it hurt. Small successes remain true even when the big things are burning. By the time I returned to the house, the sponsors had started to leave. I knew because Clara's event page had gone from bright to gray. The dates still sat there. The photos still glowed. The contact link still promised care. None of them worked. A quiet note appeared at the bottom of the page. "This event has been canceled. Refunds will be processed within 7 to 10 business days." The sentence wore a suit and carried a briefcase to a funeral. A dozen messages waited from unknown addresses. Some told me I was a hero. Some told me I was a monster. One long note arrived from a woman who had attended Clara's workshops. She said the class had taught her to breathe. She said the teacher's words had kept her in the world when she wanted to leave it. She asked me how both things could be true at once. I wrote back that they could because people are large and terrible and holy in the same breath. I wrote back that it is possible to build a bridge while standing on a lie, and that sometimes the bridge still holds people even as it ruins you. I did not send the message. I saved it in drafts and walked away. At dusk, a car idled outside my small rental. I watched through the curtain as a man stepped out with a camera on his shoulder and a microphone in his hand. He looked young enough to still practice questions in a mirror. He knocked. I waited. He knocked again. He left a business card and said through the wood that I deserved to set the record straight. Deserve is a strange word when it comes to truth. It suggests it belongs to you and not to the river that carries it. After he left, I opened the door and picked up the card. The station logo shone in blue and white. The card smelled like ink and slight rain. I set it in a drawer under the stamped copies from court. Let the two papers sit together like distant cousins who do not speak. Closer to 9, a message arrived from a number labeled simply K. For a moment, I thought it might be Kyle. It was not. It was a sponsor from a brand that had paid to put its products into Clara's videos. The message was cold with sympathy. In light of recent developments, we are pausing our partnership. We wish your family healing. Every word smiled through carefully closed teeth. I sat at the table and placed my palms flat on the wood the way I had at the courthouse. My hands looked older than they did 2 weeks ago, or maybe honesty adds years you finally deserve to wear. When the phone rang again, I answered without looking. I knew her voice. It arrived tired and raw. "They are calling me names," she said. I did not know there were so many words for hate. I said nothing. "They are digging through everything," she said. "Old pictures, old contracts, that blog." I tried to explain, but it made it worse. "You tried to explain to the internet," I said. "I went live," she said. I cried. I told them I have grown. They do not believe me. "They are not a person," I said. "They are a storm." "What do I do?" she asked. The words did not sound like my daughter's. They sounded like a woman trying on humility and finding that it pinched. "You sit in it," I said. "You let it pass through you. You do not grab the nearest stranger and make them hold your umbrella." "I do not deserve this," she whispered. "I saved you from what you deserved 15 years ago," I said. "This is what remains." The line went quiet. Then softer than breath she asked, "Do you hate me?" "No," I said, "but I cannot protect you from this. I already protected you from one accident." "This one belongs to you," she exhaled. The sound trembled. "What about Eli?" she asked. "He is asleep," I said. "He made a fort with my couch cushions and then fell asleep under it holding a flashlight that does not work. He is fine." "I want to see him," she said. "You can," I said. "Tomorrow, at the library, 2 hours. Bring books. Bring nothing else, no speeches, no cameras." She agreed so quickly I felt a brief ache behind my ribs. A reminder that there is still a small animal living where the bond used to be. After the call, I stood at the sink without turning on the water. I watched the drain. I watched the way the metal circle held its center. I told myself I could do that too. Later, near midnight, the blog post reached a national outlet. An editor added a headline that made the story sound like a lesson assigned to a class. The comments multiplied. A few called for forgiveness. More asked why it takes public shame to make a private confession. A handful wrote about the boy in the van, the boy who learned to walk again, the boy who now played soccer on a green field and had a small scar at the edge of his hairline that only his family knew how to find. I hoped he was asleep in a room that smelled like clean sheets. I hoped he never read any of this. Alvin texted me once more. "Tell me if you need anything at all." I wrote back. "I need you to keep the files where the weather cannot touch them." He sent a thumbs up, then wrote, "I admire you." The word made me uncomfortable. Admiration belongs on shelves where it can gather dust. I turned off the lights and left the window cracked open. The night carried a thin coolness that smelled like metal and rain. I lay on the couch and listened to passing cars make small rivers along the street. Before sleep came, I whispered something that surprised me. Let her find a way to live. In the morning, I would meet her in the children's section between the puzzles and the plastic dinosaurs. I would watch her read aloud without looking up. I would count each time she swallowed like a person learning to breathe underwater. I would let Eli choose 2 books to take home, one about stars, one about bridges. I would not comment on the titles. I would carry both. For now, I closed my eyes and let the day end. The post continued to move through the world as if it had a mind of its own. Maybe it did. Some truths are not messages. They are migrations. They pass over and through and leave feathers on the ground where you can find them later and say this is the proof that something larger once made the sky a different shape. I slept and dreamed of water without fear. In the dream, I was walking along a beach made of old paper. The waves were soft. Each time the tide reached my feet, the ink lifted from the pages and turned to birds. They rose and then scattered, and the air filled with letters that did not belong to any more. Morning came without sound. For a while I lay still, listening for something, rain, a knock, the familiar call of Eli's voice, but the house was quiet. The world was holding its breath. I made tea, poured it into a travel cup, and walked to the library. It was early, the doors were still locked. I waited outside on the concrete steps, the steam curling in the cold air. When the doors opened, I went in and took a seat by the children's section, where sunlight landed on the worn carpet. A few minutes later, Clara appeared, her hair pulled back, eyes hidden behind large glasses that did nothing to disguise the dark beneath them. She carried 2 books and a paper bag with cookies. Eli ran ahead of her, waving. "Grandma!" He crashed into me with the small weight of forgiveness. I laughed, though it caught in my throat. "You've grown," I said. He grinned. "Mom says you have a library card. Can we use it?" "Of course," I said. Clara stood near the doorway, hesitant. "Can we sit here?" she asked, pointing to the table by the window. "Yes," I said. "We can sit anywhere." We sat. Eli opened the books, one about constellations, another about bridges, and started reading aloud. His voice filled the space between us like a soft truce. When he was lost in the pages, Clara spoke. "They're saying horrible things, Mom, about you, about me." "I know. I don't even read the comments anymore." "You shouldn't," I said. "They're not a mirror, they're weather." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know what to do." "Start again," I said. "Tell the truth when you work, be small for a while, small things survive storms." "I can't rebuild," she said. "Everyone knows now." "Everyone always knows eventually," I said. "You just lived longer than most before it happened." She nodded, tears welling but not falling. "I wanted to make something good out of the pain." "You did," I said, "but you built it on denial. Now you can build again. It will be smaller, but it will be real." Eli looked up. "Mom, look at this," he said, pointing at the bridge book. "It says bridges work because both sides pull. If one side stops, the bridge falls." Clara smiled faintly. "Smart boy," she said. I met her eyes. "He's right," I said. She closed the book. "Are you angry at me?" "I was," I said. "Now I'm tired." She reached into the paper bag and pushed the cookies toward me. "Eli baked them," she said. "He wanted to bring you something." I took one. The taste was too sweet, but I ate it anyway. We stayed for 2 hours. We talked about school projects and dinosaurs and a science fair that would happen next month. We did not talk about court or banks or the internet. When it was time to leave, Clara stood and said, "Can we come again?" "Yes," I said. "You can come every week." She nodded. "I'll try." When they left, I watched them walk through the glass doors, Eli holding her hand, the sunlight making their shadows stretch long and thin. For the first time in months, I did not feel the weight of being the only adult in the story. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, the mirror beside me, the notebook open. I could hear the faint sound of children playing somewhere down the street. Life continuing as it always does. I wrote, Day 6. The storm has done its work. It has torn the roof off every lie and left the walls standing. She came to the library today. She spoke quietly, the way people do when they know the world is listening too closely. I saw the child she used to be. I saw the woman she might still become. Perhaps both can live in the same skin. I closed the notebook and turned the mirror so that it faced the window. In the reflection, I could see the streetlights trembling in the wind, their halos soft and gold. The phone buzzed once more. A text from Alvin, "The article has settled. Reporters moved on. It's over." I typed back, "It's never over, but it's quieter now." Then I turned off the phone and stepped outside. The night smelled of wet earth and cooling metal. I walked to the end of the street where the pavement met the grass and drew a small line with the chalk I had bought days ago. A single white mark, thin as breath. A neighbor walking his dog looked at me curiously. "You making art?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just leaving something temporary." He nodded and kept walking. The rain began again, soft and tired. The chalk line blurred, then disappeared. I watched it fade, feeling the strange lightness that comes when something finally vanishes the way it was meant to. When I went back inside, the kettle was still warm. I made one last cup of tea and sat beside the mirror. The crack caught the lamplight, dividing my reflection but not destroying it. I raised the cup in a quiet toast. "To bridges," I whispered. "To storms, to what stays." I drank. The taste was bitter and real. Outside, thunder murmured like a voice too weary to shout. Inside, the silence finally felt like peace. The rain was light that morning, soft as a whispered secret. I stepped outside the small house where Eli had slept under a blanket that smelled faintly of cookies and crayons. He ran ahead, feet splashing in shallow puddles, the sound sharp and sweet against the dull hum of the street. I followed slowly, chalk in hand. The box held 6 colors, bright and patient. I knelt on the wet pavement and drew the first line, a bridge between 2 imagined islands. Eli crouched beside me, dipping his fingers in the soft powder, smearing colors into arcs that looked like rainbows but felt more like promises. "Grandma," he said, "why do bridges work?" I smiled, reaching to straighten his damp hair. "Because both sides pull together," I said. "If one side stops, the bridge falls, but if both sides hold, it stands. That's the way it is with everything that matters." He nodded solemnly, pressing his small hands into the wet chalk. I thought of Clara and all the weight she had carried alone. I thought of the secrets she had tried to keep buried, the lies I had once protected, the storm that had finally cleared. I drew a circle around our little bridge, a small protective space. The colors bled into each other, the chalk dissolving with the water. Eli's laughter scattered across the street, tiny echoes of sunlight in the rain. A neighbor passed by with his dog, a nod of recognition, no questions asked. Some moments are too delicate to explain. Some lessons cannot be taught in words. We continued drawing, line by line, bridge by bridge. Each sweep of the chalk was a choice, to stay, to hold, to let go. I let Eli choose colors, let him decide which parts of the bridge would be strongest, which arcs would reach the furthest. I followed his lead, my hand steady, my heart quiet. After a while, Eli paused. "Grandma, can we make the bridge long enough for Mom to see it?" I looked at him. His eyes were clear, innocent, honest. I nodded. "Yes, we will make it long enough." The wind picked up, playful and gentle, carrying droplets that blurred our colors, mixing red into blue, green into yellow. The rain did not wash away the bridge. It softened it, made it pliable, more alive. I could hear Clara approaching, footsteps hesitant, caught between fear and curiosity. She stopped a few paces behind, watching without interrupting. I didn't look at her yet. I let her see Eli first, laughing and stretching the bridge across the wet pavement. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet. "Eli, is that for me?" "Yes," he said, not looking up. "We are making it so you can walk across." She smiled, a tentative smile that carried the weight of months of fear and misunderstanding. She knelt beside him, adding a few strokes of her own, careful, deliberate. I finally turned to her. "You don't have to cross yet," I said. "But when you do, the bridge is ready." She nodded, swallowing. The rain continued to fall, not harsh or condemning, just present. The chalk blurred under our hands, the colors blending in a way that seemed intentional, as if the storm itself were approving our work. I took a step back, letting both of them lead. Eli held her hand and she followed him, tracing the lines we had drawn. The bridge bent slightly under their weight but did not collapse. I watched, feeling the strange lightness of truth finally being carried across the space between us. No walls, no doors, no legal papers. Only the rain, the chalk, and the bridge we had built together. The wind shifted, carrying a distant sound of traffic and birds, merging with the laughter of my grandson and the quiet tears of my daughter. I breathed deeply, letting the air settle inside me. I opened the notebook and wrote, Day 7. Bridges are fragile, but they exist for a reason. We are learning how to hold both sides. We are learning that storms will come, but we can meet them together, step by step. I closed the notebook, leaving it beside the kettle and the mirror, the crack catching the dim light like a scar that had healed. Outside, the rain softened further, turning the pavement into a mirror. Eli skipped along the bridge, Clara following, careful, steady. I watched them, letting my heart unclench. The day was quiet now. The storm had passed, not because it wanted to, but because we had built something that could endure it. I sat down beside the chalk, dipping my fingers in the wet colors one last time. I drew a small circle around us, a protective space. When it washed away, I let it go. For the first time in a long time, I felt no weight. Only the bridge, only the rain, only the quiet understanding that truth, like a bridge, could carry us forward if we held on gently and let go where we must. And in that simple moment, the world seemed wide enough for all of us.